Centuries ago, the birth of a royal child could alter the fate of an entire kingdom. These heirs weren't merely children, they were symbols carefully moulded from the moment they took their first breath. They were trained to lead armies, navigate the treacherous world of diplomacy, and one day rule. But what if a royal child emerged from the womb not strong and sharp, but different? What if he couldn't speak clearly, struggled to walk, or failed to learn like the others? In the cold, calculated eyes of kings and queens, in the ruthless world of monarchs, this wasn't seen as a child needing love or care, it was seen as a defect, an embarrassment, a crack in the divine illusion of royal perfection. This was not simply a personal sorrow, it was a contamination, a threat, a scandal. Throughout history, royal children born with disabilities were not merely overlooked, they were buried alive in silence, hidden in remote institutions, erased from portraits and family trees, or worse, declared dead while still breathing. Their existence alone endangered the illusion of perfection that monarchies fed to the masses. This is the forgotten tale of royal children born with Down syndrome, a genetic condition once shrouded in dread and ignorance. And it is also the chilling story of how their families, bound by pride and fear, resorted to unthinkable acts to preserve a spotless crown. Down syndrome is a genetic disorder caused by the presence of an extra chromosome. Where most humans carry 46 chromosomes, those with Down syndrome carry 47. This tiny difference, the addition of a single chromosome, alters the body and mind, shaping unique features and developmental patterns. Individuals with Down syndrome often share recognizable traits: almond-shaped eyes, a flatter face, smaller ears, and a single crease running across the palm. Many also battle medical complications, from heart defects to thyroid disorders to delayed development. Today, we understand that people with Down syndrome can live vibrant, meaningful lives. But in the shadows of history, before science had a name for it, these children were seen as omens, curses, proof of divine punishment, polluted bloodlines, or moral rot. In royal houses where every heir had to represent strength, beauty, and divine right, a child born with Down syndrome was not viewed as human. They were seen as a shameful distortion, a whisper to be snuffed out. Consider the haunting case of Nerissa Bowes-Lyon, born in 1919, and her sister Catherine, born in 1926. First cousins to Queen Elizabeth II, the two girls belonged to Britain's extended royal family. Early in their lives, it became horrifyingly clear to the court both children suffered from profound intellectual disabilities. It's believed one or both of them had Down syndrome, or something very close to it. But instead of receiving care within the gilded halls of the royal household, they were discarded. The family quietly committed them to the Royal Earlswood Hospital, a long-term institution hidden away in the countryside of Surrey. Once inside, the doors shut behind them with finality. The girls didn't die, not then, but it may as well have been a funeral. They were erased, not just from memory, but from the royal record itself. The final cruelty? The official family documents recorded both sisters as dead, long before their actual death. For decades, they were alive, locked in a cold hospital, while the world believed they had been buried. Their voices were never heard, their names never spoken, their existence, a ghost story the Crown refused to tell. Nerissa remained at Earlswood until her death in 1986, and Catherine lived there for nearly her entire life, passing away in 2014. According to reports, their family dropped by about as often as meteor showers, rarely and with very little fanfare. For decades, the wider public had no idea who these women were, let alone that they were members of the British royal family. Their identities were so well hidden, you'd think they were part of MI6, not born into Buckingham Palace lineage. It wasn't until the 1980s that journalists stumbled upon their existence, and the revelation caused public outrage. Suddenly, tea wasn't the only thing being spilled in Britain. The incident sparked debates over how people with disabilities were treated by those who had more castles than compassion. This story made one thing painfully clear. Even deep into the 20th century, royalty still clung to the habit of sweeping disabled relatives under the very expensive rug. The fear of scandal trumped empathy every single time. Apparently, if a child couldn't wave regally or sit through a state banquet without drooling, they were declared unfit for the Crown's Instagram feed. Hypothetically speaking, Princess Alexandrian of Prussia was born in 1915, daughter of Crown Prince Wilhelm. She was diagnosed with Down syndrome, though in those days, people were still figuring out what to call it, let alone how to support it. Alexandrian's case differed slightly from Nerissa and Catherine's. Her parents actually let her live at home, revolutionary stuff for the time. She even showed up in some family portraits and postcards. That's right, she was literally on postcards, which in royal terms is basically a public LinkedIn profile. But before you imagine her waltzing into royal duties with a tiara and clipboard, let's be clear, she wasn't part of official court life. No ribbon-cutting ceremonies, no balcony waves. She went to a special school and lived a quiet life with her family, far from the maddening flashbulbs of public life. She lived into adulthood, passing away in 1980, but the message was still loud and clear. A child with disabilities might be loved behind palace doors, but don't expect to see them on the royal Christmas card. Then there was Anne de Gaulle, born in 1928, daughter of Charles de Gaulle, the man who would one day run France, and his wife Yvonne. Not a royal family, but still serious A-list status in Europe. Anne had Down syndrome, but unlike many children of her time, she wasn't locked away in an institution. She was raised at home and by all accounts was her father's absolute favourite. You know you've made it when a war hero and future president can't get enough of your bedtime stories. Still, Anne wasn't exactly a press darling. Her condition was rarely discussed, and you wouldn't catch her waving beside her father on parade day. She stayed largely out of the spotlight. Tragically, she died at the age of 20 from pneumonia, leaving her family heartbroken. In her memory, Yvonne de Gaulle established the Anne de Gaulle Foundation and a hospital for children with disabilities. So yes, compassion did exist, but it was still an uphill battle, especially in a society where pretending your family was flawless seemed more important than actually loving the people in it. These 20th century cases are well documented, but historians suspect they're just the tip of the royal iceberg. And much like actual icebergs, most of the history lies hidden below the surface. In medieval and early modern times, children born with disabilities were often treated in ways that would make even a villainous Disney stepmother cringe. Many were abandoned, shipped off to remote countryside estates, or cloistered in monasteries where nobody asked questions, not because they were shy, but because asking questions about royal family members could be bad for your health. The obsession with divine favour and appearing strong meant that any child who wasn't perfect was seen as a threat to the entire monarchy. Some historians even suspect that babies born with severe disabilities may have been quietly disappeared soon after birth. Of course, it's hard to prove because these stories were buried deeper than a pharaoh's tomb. This wasn't just a single kingdom issue either. It was a global royal pastime. Hide anything that didn't sparkle with perfection. Across Europe and beyond, monarchies built their power not just with swords and politics, but with fairy tales. Where the bloodline was always noble, the babies always rosy, and everyone was born camera-ready. Admitting that a prince or princess was born with a disability? Unthinkable. The result was centuries of quiet tragedy. Children were hidden, denied affection, and excluded from the only world they were born to be part of, all because they didn't fit society's obsession with flawlessness. Fast forward to today, and the world has done a major glow-up. People with Down syndrome now have access to healthcare, education, and the chance to live full, joyful lives. They go to school, start businesses, fall in love, act in movies, compete in sports and win hearts, not because they're royal, but because they're human. Most importantly, they are seen. They're celebrated. They're no longer treated like shameful family secrets locked in an attic. But let's not get too comfortable. This progress is recent, so recent it's basically still in its probation period. A few generations ago, life was very different. The stories of Nerissa and Catherine Beau's Lion, Princess Alexandrian of Prussia and Anne de Gaulle are there to remind us. You could be born into palaces, privilege and political power, and still be locked behind closed doors for simply being different. These children didn't get the same warmth, attention or birthday balloons as their siblings. In the eyes of their royal relatives, they were not heirs or dignitaries, they were inconvenient truths. Some were treated as divine punishment, others as stains on a spotless family crest. Their names were scrubbed from history books. Their faces vanished from photo albums. Public appearances? Forget it. These children were made invisible, not just to the public, but often to their own families. Many spent their lives in cold, impersonal institutions where family visits were as rare as royal humility. Others were stashed in faraway estates or monasteries, out of sight, out of scandal. They lived in silence so complete it's a wonder we know their names at all. But make no mistake, The fact that their stories were buried doesn't mean they didn't matter. In fact, it's exactly why we should tell them louder. History often celebrates the victories and downfalls of kings and queens, figures who led armies and shaped entire nations. Yet some of the most painful injustices are the ones history tried to erase. These are the silent sufferings of individuals intentionally pushed into the shadows. The children we've discussed today were born into a time when having a disability was seen as a disgrace, a shameful secret to be hidden at all costs. But their lives were every bit as valuable and meaningful as those of any monarch, prince or princess.